So this question starts off by giving us this long equation here. It goes on to say in the xy plane, the graph of the given equation is a circle. So very important. What is the circle equation? So the circle equation is x minus h parentheses squared plus y minus k parentheses squared equals r squared, where h comma k is the center of the circle and r represents the radius of the circle. So obviously the equation that we have here is not in the same form as this equation here. So I'm going to need to get this to look more like that, right? So what I'm going to do is a process called completing the square. I'm going to complete the square. So if you don't know how to do this, you can just Google complete the square and you will find tons of videos on that. And also I would suggest some practice problems. But the process is here, right? So if you follow along, it's not a very difficult process. The first step is to group the x's together and the y's together. So I'm going to have my x squared minus 16x. And then we leave a blank space there because we're going to add something in. And then I have my y squared minus 4y. We're going to leave a blank there because we're going to add something in there. And then I'm going to move my 32 over to the right. So this becomes equaling negative 32. Okay. Now the next step is, well, what am I putting in these blanks? Well, what we do is we look at the middle term here, right? Because it's going to be three terms, 1, 2, 3. And we take half of that number, so negative 16. Half of negative 16 is negative 8. And then you square it. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. And that's what we add, right? So plus 64 here. Whatever you add to one side of the equation, you must add to the other. So I'm going to also put a plus 64 over here. Now we're going to do the exact same thing to the y terms, right? So our middle term here is negative 4. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. So I'm going to add 4 here and add 4 here, right? Because whatever I add to one side, I have to add to the other. So now what I have is x squared minus 16x plus 64 plus y squared minus 4y plus 4 is equal to, well, negative 32 plus 64 is positive 32 plus 4 is positive 36. So this all equals 36. And I can pretty much answer the question already because I see that 36 is in the r squared position. But let's just continue to show you how this ends up looking like that. So the whole reason why we call this completing the square is because each of these trinomials, right, so the x trinomials and the y trinomials, are perfect squares. When I factor x squared minus 16x plus 64, what I get is x minus 8 squared. In fact, it will always be, if you do this process correctly, it'll always be, once you factored it, just whatever variable you're focusing on and whatever half of this middle term was, right? So again, our x we have, and half of negative 16 is negative 8. So plus, so for that same reason, here we should have y minus 2 squared. Why? Because half of negative 4 is negative 2. So y minus 2 squared. And you can do the math to make sure if you're uncertain that these things, that this does equal that, and that this does in fact equal that. And then of course this is still equal to 36. So here's our equation. I'll write it up here at the top. X minus 8 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 36. The question is asking for the radius. So because we know that this is the r squared portion of our equation, we know that r squared is equal to 36. We can square root both sides. And r is therefore equal to 6. And therefore, a correct answer here is choice